Okay, good evening, folks. I don't know if you can see me well or not, but if so, it's time for a new thing called Ghost Stories with Iaac David Brigmond. On today's Ghost Stories with me, I will tell you a made up ghost story that could have happened, could have not happened, but say there was a guy named John Peterson, and he had a wife named Cindy Peterson, and they bought a house had just bought a house, and basically, when they bought this house, they turned around and moved in. Well, they had a baby that they just had from when they lived in their previous home. They had to move out because they just had a baby and they needed more space. So they did, and so they moved into the house. They found out basically while living there, they noticed one night they was watching TV and they noticed in the TV something going cuckoo. They just put it off as, oh well, the TV's messing up. So next thing you know, well, then later on, Cindy was telling her husband, and she said, "Hey, honey," and he said, "What?" He said, "Uh, I know that was just the TV going on, but what would make the TV do that? I don't know." So they just said that. So later on, now, I do remember, if I don't say his name no more, I done forgotten the name I used because I have a habit of having bad memory. If you can remember it, keep me up to date with it. But anyway, he got to the point where he decided, he was going to bed that night because he got tired. So they both decided to go to bed. They went to bed and they felt like something was touching them in bed. So he said, honey, he said, if you are really feeling, in the mood, you should have let me know. Well, she wasn't in the mood. And he thought, oh, okay, then why did you touch me? And she said, I didn't touch you, honey. So they didn't know what was going on. So next thing you know, well, they got up the next morning and everything was fine. Well, this was on Thursday night when he thought she was in the mood. Hold on. Well, come the next day, which was a Friday, he and her had decided they was going to take a date and they were going to go out to eat. And if they get in the mood, maybe get a hotel room. If not, go on home. Well, they went out to eat and they had a babysitter, a girl that they knew of that they could trust because she was sort of like their young friend that they had known for some time, because they knew her dad and they knew her. And they asked, would she be willing to, every time they needed her to babysit, would she be willing to? And they pay her good money. Well, she said, sure. She was going to babysit that baby. And plus, she loved that baby. That was like her own child because every time she would see them at her house, they'd bring the baby over because her family loved their baby. And so she was willing to take care of her little friend. And so they did. But while she was there, she noticed some weird stuff going on. And while it was going on, come to find out, she had noticed some of the weird stuff they had noticed, but in a different way. Like she noticed the spirit in there, but in her own way, because it talked to her in a different way than it did them. Like it talked to them through touching them, and it talked to her through actually talking and stuff. It was like, get out. It was acting weird now. And she was freaking out. She called them and said what was going on. And they had just got through eating. It was lucky. And so they said, well, we're coming home now. We just got through eating. So they go home and she told them what happened. She said, I'll babysit again, but we got to figure out what's causing this mess. And so then that night, they heard some racket going on like a hurricane or tornado or earthquake. And next thing you know, the walls were bleeding. And they were freaking out. Why is the walls bleeding, man? They was freaking out. And they didn't know what was going on. So then next thing you know, well then, after they saw the walls were bleeding, they started freaking out. So they decided that they were going to call the local priest or preacher and talk to him. As a matter of fact, they had just moved into the neighborhood and hadn't been there long. And they had thought about that Sunday going to the nearby church and start being members of the church so they could, it's not, because they like church and they hadn't been to church since they moved there. So they talked to nearby church and they introduced themselves and they said, look, we're going to stop by Sunday and attend your church service. And if we like it, we possibly may be new members of your church. And the preacher said, wonderful, we need new members. We encourage new members. He was going on about it. Next thing you know, well, he said, I got to tell you something. He said, there's been some spooky things going on at this house here. And he said, what house is that? He told what house. He said, oh, son, maybe we need to talk tomorrow. And they called. See, it wasn't that late when they called the preacher, because it was like, because I think they went to eat about 5 something, because they were being early birds about eating. Ate about 5 something, and it was probably about 6 or 7 something when they got back. And they decided they was going to call the preacher and introduce themselves. They said, I hope it's not too late, sir. We're calling to tell you that we'll be visiting your church on Sunday, and if we like the church service, we might just be new members of your church. And that's when he got excited about it. So he goes on talking to him on the phone, and when they told the story and he found out where they were talking about, he said, you know what, best thing for me to do is it all right for me to come visit y'all tomorrow? Because not only do I want to get to know you, but I got some stuff to tell you since you told me where you live. So he said, sure. So Saturday comes, and they said, before Saturday came, when they had a conversation that night, said, before we hang up, preacher, brother, say his name was, Mark. His name was John Mark. Now, I know you've probably heard that name somewhere before, but I probably have to. He said, Brother Mark, he said, do you like coffee? He said, sure, I like coffee. He said, okay, how about coming over tomorrow for coffee? So then he said, okay, so they made a plan for him to come. He comes over and they talk, and he likes these new people. He said, I like you already. You seem like some good-hearted Christian folks. And they're like, yep, you seem like a good preacher. I bet you we'll get along at your church. And he said, oh, you will. He told everything they did, and it was similar to the church that I myself go to. So they said, and when he said, one reason why I wanted to come by and introduce myself was because your house had a tragic murder happen here. The reason why no one tells about it when people move in is because they're scared that no one will want to move in if they know the truth. I wish and pray and hope that someone would tell them, but they don't do it, and you find out later. So that's what happened. And he told the whole story, and they said, wait a minute, I think we heard about that. That was here? Yup. It's like, okay then. So they said, what do we do about it? He said, well, if this is true, that this is haunted, you need to get a exorcism done here, and I need to get someone that'll help you. Actually, in my business as a preacher, there is such a person. I can get him to come over, and he can do an exorcism for you. So the guy comes over, and he does an exorcism, and they expel or exorcise the ghost. Well, the spirit's gone, but years go by, and they kept going to that church, enjoying the church. And they were told if they keep their minds on God, keep their life straight, they went through a whole regimen of what you got to do to keep the spirit out, it'll be all right. Well, just happened to be that there was this guy, and he didn't like them people too well, and he was an older gentleman. Well, he died, and these people who lived in that house went to his funeral, and one night they started noticing some more wacky stuff. Kind of find out the old man that died, his spirit was haunting that place. Then you come to find out the reason why it was because people in that town did not know who the killer was of the people that lived in that house. They knew someone done it. They knew they were from that town, but they never found out because the guy was real thorough about it, so he didn't get caught. Come to find out, it was the old man that died, and that's why to this day he was so bitter. Everybody just thought he lived bitter, didn't know he was that way because he was the killer. So his payment for killing all them people was for him to be a spirit himself, and when he died and haunt that house. Well, he found out after he died he was haunting. He gonna haunt that place because because you got to know, that somehow the dead, how those dead that haunt them places like that, how they know to haunt it, I don't know, but he knew it somehow, and he haunted that place. And then they had to get the guy back and do another exorcism, and when they got him away, they've been pretty free of it for a long time. Now, not all of these stories that I told are going to be the same way, but that one just happened to be my first in this series of ghost stories with Iaac David Brigmond. So I figured to let the first one be like that. If you like it or don't like it, comment about it, let me know, and keep finding out about the other forms of media I'm going to do on YouTube. Like maybe I'll be doing my preaching, I'll be doing my show, and I'll also be doing this scary story stuff. What it is that these will be stories I made up, and there will also be stories I picked up on. I didn't say they were real, but I do think if they're interesting to me, I'll tell you about them in case they're interesting to you. Well, I'll let y'all go. Have a nice day. God bless you, and please don't let all these stories spook you too bad. Just let them be more entertainment purposes. And if you find out there's a story like that and it's happening to you personally, tell me about it. I want to know about your stories. All right, have a nice day. God bless you. Dee-dee.